I was pleasantly surprised at every turn how asking for what you want and being a little flexible, I find that I ended up getting everything and more that I was looking for.
This is Intentionally Ever After. Join intentional lifestyle coach Joe Bukartek for a series of personal conversations and coaching sessions with various people about how living with intention shows up for them.
So I'll actually start by asking you, I know you have kindly written out a pre-prepared thing, but I'm going to ask you to give an introduction as to who you are that isn't your LinkedIn bio, what you want people to know about you that they couldn't maybe look up on the internet.
I haven't Googled myself recently. I don't make a habit of it. I would imagine if you did, one thing you would find that wasn't work related was the record label from 10 years ago now. Wow. But the stuff that's not on there, we recently, 2 years ago, relocated to Seattle from Central Florida. I really like cats. I like music a lot, play guitar, games, got 2 kids. Yeah, we're really liking life out here. So
nice. Tell me more about the record label.
Yeah, so back in 2008, I started getting into buying records, and there were a lot of albums that I was looking for, assuming that everything was available on vinyl, and found that it wasn't. It's like, man, it'd be cool I wonder if I could do that. And there were smaller labels run by a single person that I had bought stuff from, and I had reached out to some of those people and asked them hey, how did you get started? And I was asking, went back and read some of the questions, how did you pick the name for your labels? You don't know anything at the beginning, and it's kind of funny looking back. But that was the goal, was I was going to put out music that I really liked on vinyl that wasn't available, and that maybe a small group of other people would be into if I did it. I think at the end of the run, which was 3 or 4 years, we ended up, you have to number each release sequentially. I think we got up to 24, 25. Not all of them were zingers, but my buddy that follows different record labels and tracks prices of stuff on this online site called Discogs, he was like, man, have you looked? I did this one box set. That was kind of the coolest thing that I put out. And he was like, have you seen how much it was? We were selling it for $75. I almost went broke putting this thing out because the total cost was $20,000. I remember getting the bill. I was sitting in my aunt and uncle's house in Pennsylvania. It was around Christmas time, I think, is why I was home, and reading it, and my heart sunk. I was like, oh my God, I could bankrupt my family doing this. What am I doing? Obviously it all worked out fine, but he told me that it was selling for $200 or $300. And because it's never going to be done again, because I'm the only one that could do it. And there's a couple of them out there that have been like that. So it's pretty cool. I feel like that was one thing that I made my mark or impression on the planet while I was doing it.
Yeah, and you really went for it.
Yeah. This
was while you were also working full time.
Yeah, that's a good point. So timing wise, I got the idea, in 08, 09, and really started going after it right into 2010 was the first thing that we put out. And my first child, my daughter, was born in 2010. So leading up to there, I had a lot more free time, and I didn't have a ton going on at work, and I was able to balance working and home life, which wasn't that intense at the time, and trying to build a website, build an online shop, have a social media presence, all of that stuff, and keep it all working pretty well. So my son was born in 2013, and that's whenever I stopped doing the label because shit just got way too intense.
So it wasn't a coincidence that the two
No,
things
that's
coincided.
exactly the reason. There was way too many commitments and I lost the fun. I didn't enjoy it anymore. I had to make decisions on what I would or wouldn't do or who I would work with based on whether I thought I could sell enough to at least break even on it in a reasonable amount of time. And that made me sick to think that this is not why I got into this. I got into it because of the passion for the music that I was doing. And I got to the point where I didn't even want to listen to records anymore. And for years after that, I didn't touch them. Like my record collection for a long time was this time capsule of shit that I got up to that point and then didn't touch. And only recently had started buying and listening to records again. But yeah, it just got ugly. And so because my heart wasn't in it and financially it wasn't working out, didn't have the time, it just made sense on so many levels. We just called it quits and liquidated as much as we could.
Yeah. What's your relationship with vinyl nowadays?
Pretty good. Like, I don't impulse buy anymore, which is a big problem when you get into something that costs $20 to $30 a pop, Pretty much only buy stuff from some of the same small labels that I kind of looked up to when I started, and smaller bands, ones that I would go see live if I could or have in the past. So I know the work that goes into it. So I'll like hand pick what I'll get. And like I said, it's expensive. So I support other hobbies and habits.
Yeah. Be a little more selective.
Right.
Yeah. Well, the first question I have for you is actually the first formal question is about intentionality, but I feel like you've been touching on it quite a bit already. For you, what does it mean to live intentionally?
So, I was thinking about this. It's about putting energy and thought into something that you want to achieve. And a good example of it for me personally was whenever I got the idea to move from Florida to Washington State. I mean, everybody jokes with us whenever they hear that that's where we moved from. It's like, oh, you can't get much farther, huh? I heard that 1,000 times. It's fine. But yeah, to drop that bomb, the first time, I'll never forget. Like my wife and I were arguing. It was not good, and we were sitting on our back porch. She was like, what is going on with you? And I was like, I have something I need to tell you. I think I want to move. She's like, okay, where? Seattle. She's like, ugh. So even getting it to the point where I wanted to say that took a lot of thought. And from that point, really pouring into that decision all of the energy and effort to get that to happen. It was a monumental thing. Like, I saw the small opportunity that I didn't even know was real and needed to make sure that, it was a work-related move, but they didn't know who I was out here. So I needed to make sure they were on board with this and needed to make sure my family was on board with it. It meant leaving everything that we had. We had lived there for 13 years. My wife had lived there since she was 5. So it was taking everything that we know and gambling on moving across the country diagonally. So it took a lot of work, but I feel like if I didn't put all of that energy and effort into it, it could have fallen apart at any point. And I swear it was trying to along the way. But if I had started and was only thinking about the end point, I don't know that it would have happened either. This is a monumental effort. It took like 2 years from the time that conversation happened to the point that we moved here. So breaking something down also into logical pieces and then working toward those. But just really putting your mind toward this thing, this idea, this achievement, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And actually putting your energy into achieving it, and in all ways, and find that you might think that, like that book, The Secret, I think that at the end of the day, all that is about is being intentional.
Yeah.
And it eventually happens because you're working your ass off to make it happen. I mean, the shit just doesn't happen. right?
Well, that was actually my next wondering is you're talking about putting a lot of energy and focus into making it happen, right? When does it become intentional living from the ideation, right? You said it took 2 years from the moment you had the conversation with your wife until the moving date. How long had you been thinking about it or considering it before you had the actual conversation with her?
4 or 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it was.
So at what point do you consider that you started living intentionally in this scenario?
After I knew that it was a real possibility, because that conversation was either going to be, yeah, stop thinking about this, or now you can really start thinking about this. Because up till then, it was just thinking about the conversation and what the pitch was for why I wanted to do this, And once that was behind us, now it's that next thing. It's, okay, now I need to find out if my plan for moving out there for my role makes sense for those guys. And I got to tell everybody here that I work with for the past however many years, hey, I want to leave and I want to go over there and I want you guys to help pay for it. Which is a huge ask.
Well, seemingly, right? It certainly feels like it.
Yeah.
Right. But obviously it worked out.
Right. And I was pleasantly surprised at every turn how, asking for what you want and being a little flexible, you find that I ended up getting everything and more that I was looking for.
That's interesting. Is it oversimplistic then to say that living intentionally requires asking for it or requires having a conversation with somebody else?
Yeah. I don't think that you're going to get very far assuming that folks know what you're thinking. I have trouble with folks that don't just say what it is that they actually want to know if they're asking questions. Yeah, we deal with that at home a lot. Just ask me what you want and I'll tell you what you want to know. I don't, the whole beating around the bush thing, I don't get along well with that. But yeah, in general, I think absolutely. Like if it's not clear, you're just waiting for something to happen. Why not make it happen now? Or find out when it can and what you need to do in order to get to the point when you can.
Right. Yeah. Well, clearly it's working, right? You've tested it a couple of times in this one specific example, and it's been working.
And I would say that every time that it does work out, it makes it easier.
How so?
You find success in one small thing you asked for. Maybe you were thinking about wanting a raise or something. I mean, I remember I had asked that. I wanted a car allowance specific to that. It wasn't a raise. It was that thing. I was like, I think I want that. And then there's the line in the Lord of the Rings movie whenever Frodo's talking about the ring and he's like, all my thoughts is bent on this, So that's how I was thinking about this car allowance. And I worked up the guts to call our manager of our office at the time. And I just laid it out there. I was like, man, I want this. And he said, okay. And he rambled on about how it's tied to a certain role and blah, blah, blah. And I don't think that we can get you that thing right now, but I think we can do something. And I got a fat raise that year.
But you didn't get your car allowance.
No. Got damn close.
Yeah.
But it actually worked out so much better because in this whole transfer, everything was like percentage based cost of living difference from coast to coast and all that stuff. It was all based on my base salary. And they look at this car allowance thing as something else. So because that worked out, now percentage wise, it worked out way in my favor. But I had to ask for it. And it was, I felt, and they did too, that it was justified, right? It's not like I was slacking and just asking for all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I hesitated heavily just bringing it up. And then 2 months later to say, hey, I'm leaving. It was that close.
That's great. That's great. Yeah.
But yeah, like that win made that next conversation easier. which would have been much harder, I think, just because the context of the situation of, hey, I think I'm doing a really good job here. I'm going to go do it for another group in another area. I'm going to leave you guys high and dry here in some respect. But yeah, each time you find success in it, even if you don't, I would say it just makes it easier to get up the courage to ask for something that you feel either you deserve or that you really want. But the intentionality piece of it is knowing that you want it and that you feel that you deserve it, whatever it is. It's not just asking for everything and anything.
Right.
But I think it's within reason.
Yeah. And even if it had been a failure, perhaps you're normalizing that type of conversation, that type of ask.
Right. Yeah. I say that, and then it happened to have went my way. In a way, I don't know. Because when I hung up the phone, I went inside and I was saying, hey, I had the conversation about the car allowance and I don't know what way it's going to go. But at the time, I didn't know how that was going to turn out. It wasn't until a month or so later that I found out what became of that. But I knew whenever I had that conversation, or rather when I saw the outcome, I knew it was because of, at least in part, of that conversation or that question, right?
I would think so, right? Yeah.
So I guess I don't know what would have happened if it wasn't reciprocated, or because at the time I didn't think that it was a success. I was essentially told no and a bunch more words than that.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, it just, I think just that in the practice of asking, it does get easier.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, that actually now has me wondering, is it possible to live intentionally even if you don't get the outcome that you desire, the external outcome?
I think so. It's not all about big payouts or achievements or that kind of thing. I mean, if you have a dog and you have to wake up every morning at 5 to walk the dog, it's being intentional about making sure that the dog's needs are taken care of before you start your day, right? And becomes part of your routine, but you're doing it intentionally. I feel like if you're putting the level of thought into pretty much anything that you're doing, that's being intentional. You're not just letting stuff happen around you. I just feel like you have some level of control of the outcome of any situation that you're in. Like if you go to a restaurant and they bring you the wrong thing, you can fix that. Or you can sit back and pretend that they're going to be mad at you for asking. There's different ways to ask that, and you can go about it however you want. There's a right way and a shitty way.
Yeah. And you have the ability to respond to that situation though, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Don't, I guess it's just not idly sitting by and letting stuff happen to or at you and feeling like you have some semblance of control over any given situation. Because you do. You may not have the ultimate control, but you absolutely have a certain level of control, and understanding where that is and being happy with what that is. And if you aren't, figuring out a way to make it so that you can get to the point that you do. Think a lot about like young folks coming into the business world, and depending on where they're working, they may not feel like they have a voice. If you work at a good company that values input from everyone, that's fantastic. But a lot of places that's not the case. And it takes a while to get to the point where you think that you're being heard. It's like, how many years do you have to see my face until you value my opinion? My opinions haven't changed. Maybe they have a little bit, but at their core, they're still coming from the same person. But now because I have this longevity here, suddenly they matter. Yeah. So that can be discouraging, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't still have those opinions and share them with the people who might listen, and find a way to get your voice heard, even if it's coming out of somebody else's mouth.
Right. And that's if you decide to stay at that company, right? That's all within that one
Oh, yeah.
pathway as well, right?
You have that level of control too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not just sitting, but like the victimizing of yourself and like, oh, I can't believe what happened. It's like, and that's negativity spiral, all of that stuff. I mean, it's the opposite of being intentional. It's just letting stuff happen and not doing anything about it. Do something instead of bitching about it.
Right. Well, couldn't you say that that is being intentional, being an intentional victim?
No, I wouldn't
No,
give them that. No,
they don't get to have that.
no.
They're just defaulting
Because
into
it's
that.
what's happening regardless of intentionality.
Yeah.
It's just being like, again, idly sitting by and just taking it as it comes.
Yeah. Okay. This is great so far. I appreciate it. This is cool.
Agreed. It's fun.
All right. You ready for this next question?
Yeah.
What is one change in habit that has had an exponential payoff?
So for this, I would say diet and fitness as a combo, I guess, just and putting an effort on or emphasis on being healthy in general. So growing up, and for no fault of my family, I don't think I didn't eat very healthy. And I don't know that a lot of children in the 80s did. I mean, it was a lot of fast food, a lot of not healthy stuff. As you know, I was the guy who showed up to our college apartment with a fry daddy. So it's shameful. But yeah, if it's going back like 5 or 6 years ago, decided to start exercising and finally getting into some kind of better shape, and started reading a lot about nutrition and macros, and I religiously used that my fitness pal to track my calorie intake, and was doing these workout videos. And when I say religiously, like I had a streak. They tracked the days. It was over 1,200 days, like literally daily for years. To the point where I was so obsessed over it, I was afraid to eat anything if I didn't know what to plug into the app. And that was bad. I'm sick of that after a while.
Well,
Yeah.
Hang on a second. How did you get sick of it, but not until after 1,200 days?
I had eaten pretty much everything that I was going to eat by that point. So there was a meal saved for pretty much everything. It's like, oh yeah, that was what I had for dinner, 2 weeks ago, and just plug that shit in. And the last 6 months or so was just pencil whipping it for sure. There was a year where doing these different workout routines and stuff, I was seeing results, and I was really focused on what I was eating and not overeating and stuff, and lost a ton of weight. I think I lost like over 50 pounds or something. It was the healthiest I think I had ever been in my adult life. And I was nervous about not doing these workouts, or how do I incorporate like a normal eating routine. And it was tough, even knowing what I knew and still doing some kind of exercise routine. Still gained weight back, and not all the way, probably about 50%. And it's like, what? This is still not working out well. So at one point, a couple of years ago, I started trying to eat less meat, and then eventually, probably about a year ago, this went full vegetarian. And since that point, I haven't been tracking what I eat, but I eat whatever the hell I want. And it's been the easiest to maintain a healthy weight. And so on the diet side, that I think was a game changer for me. Coincidentally, there's a documentary on Netflix called Game Changers, and it's about plant-based diet in athletes, elite athletes. And I had watched that. That wasn't the final motivation. There were a few friends of mine that did, and that was something that caused them to transition. But yeah, that has been a huge impact on this general health. You'll find that you eat out less, and when you do, you choose healthier options, and all of that. But it's a lifestyle change thing, so it became really easy, and I feel awesome most of the time because you're not eating. That's what I noticed the most is whenever I would eat meat, I felt like shit afterward. And it took apparently, fucking 36 years to figure that one out. And then on the fitness side, after having done these videos, got into the strength training and was doing weightlifting and stuff, and millions of programs out there. A friend of mine had asked me how I was doing and what program I was following, and he started putting together programs for me. And even doing those, it started to get old. It was kind of boring. I wasn't seeing huge increases in strength or ability, and felt like I was just kind of doing it, but not getting any benefit out of it. I mean, it was definitely something, but I wasn't enjoying it, I guess. So only just recently, the same friend asked me, like, okay, so what are your fitness goals? And it was funny that it took over 5 years to finally ask that question. And it took me a while to even answer him. What I thought of was, I really enjoy hiking and mountain biking, and I want to get better at those things. So I'd like to do stuff that supports doing that, because it doesn't seem like whenever I go and do those things, I don't get any less tired, even though I'm doing this other workouts. So he's like, okay, I'm going to put together something for you that supports that. So he did. I've only been doing that for about a month now, but it's so much fun. And it's not about hitting these numbers with the weights or the different moves. He asked me what stuff I like to do, what stuff I don't like to do. So it's only things I like. The stress of trying to get better to hit like a certain percentage on some day is gone. It doesn't take a lot of time. It's so much better. And I think like that was a great example of being intentional about something that is important, but why not do it to support the stuff that you like and not just do it for, some people have different motivation. Some people want to look good naked. Some people want to be able to mountain climb,
Sure.
So figure out what that is and use those goals to drive what it is that you're doing so that it's all supporting. So you feel like you're getting something out of it while you're doing it. And it's not just for the sake of doing it.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I'm sure even though we're not in the same professional industry, I'm sure you've heard getting to the why, right?
Oh, yeah.
All right. It's essentially that why are you working out at all, right? And figuring that out. And oh, by the way, you don't have to wait until that end goal to experience that joy or that feeling that you're after, that you can get it all along the way in a way that also, by the way, supports the feeling to that end goal.
Right.
Yeah.
There's some people that work out because they want to be able to eat ice cream every night. As long as you remember that, and in the morning you're like so fucking jazzed that night you're going to get that big bowl of ice cream.
Exactly.
And get after it.
Right. That's really great. So what was it that maybe kickstarted this thing? You said about maybe 5-6 years ago, you really started, and even at the time you didn't maybe have a specific goal in mind, but you really started paying attention to your nutrition and your exercise. What do you feel like kicked that off for you?
I don't know. I think I was pretty unhappy at the time, and being overweight and just getting really sick of that part of it too. And I just wanted to try to get better. I had done, again, that's the mild amount of exercise with the motivation of being able to eat whatever I want. And that was just okay, but it doesn't last forever. So yeah, the appearance in the mirror and the weight rapidly approaching like the highest that had ever been in my life. It's like, okay, I'm going to do something here. And took that opportunity to just start and try something. And a lot of these videos tout that you can get results in this short time frame with only this amount of commitment, X number of days a week. A lot of times it's 30 minutes a day for 90 days. What I found was that's bullshit. The 30 minutes is just the middle bit. You also have the warm up and the cool down. You got to get dressed. You got to shower. So yeah, it's not 30 minutes. And at the end of 90 days, I don't know, I was day like 80 thinking like, what the fuck's going to happen in the next 10 days? That's going to make me look like and it just doesn't happen.
Look like the guy on the cover, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So that was a little frustrating, but I just kept graduating to the next more intense thing and kept doing that. And yeah, it was working. It was just a little bit slower, but I think after I started to see changes, then that became the motivation. I was like, well, let's see how far I can go with this thing. Because now I'm in new territory. I've never been this fit before. Let's see how much more fit I can be.
Well, it sounds like now you're doing exercises that you enjoy doing that enable you to get more enjoyment out of the other things that you enjoy doing. You're also eating the things you want to be eating that are making you feel good. So it sounds like you're in a really good place with all of it. Is it just simply a matter of maintaining the habit at this point?
Yeah, I guess you could call it a habit. It's just what I do at this point. It's, again, that lifestyle, it's become normal. Yeah, nobody's asking me if I want steak or chicken anymore. And that was a hard subject to broach with. I mean, it was this long, slow transition. I was opting for the meatless version of stuff for a while, but the rest of my family is not vegetarian. And that's, I guess, one good thing to point out is it's okay to be the only one. And my full joke with friends of ours that because I'm a vegetarian, that she's kind of one too. She'll every once in a while get a burger or something, but whenever we're cooking for the family, it's just we've switched over. So yeah, it's just a matter of being intentional, not worrying what someone else is going to think. And at first it was weird. It was like saying that word was, I don't know. I was worried about what people might think or the questions they might ask. Now I don't fucking care.
Yeah, because you feel really good.
Yeah. And, I find that having that attitude toward answering those kinds of questions piques others' interest a little more. And there's a friend in our neighborhood that we found out months after getting to know him that at home, they eat mostly plant-based or pretty much exclusively. But when he was here, he would eat whatever we were serving. And he was like, well, that's just being a good guest. I'm not going to tell you no. I was like, man, that's genius. It's there's no cosmic backlash for having eaten something that if you're just trying to be friendly at someone's place. I mean, if you're like really against it, then you don't have to, but it's a hard and fast rule. So.
Right. Basically what you're saying is there is no hard and fast rule. You come up with your own rule. So you don't have to come to the table saying, I am a vegetarian. Adjust things accordingly, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And unless that is what you want to say, right? But you don't have to, right? That's not the script. You have to show up and tell people you're a vegetarian. You don't have to show up and prepare yourself for the backlash that you're going to get by saying that I'm not eating chicken or steak, right?
You might get some odd looks, but you probably weren't friends with those people anyway.
Right, you're probably getting odd looks anyway, right? Not because of that.
Right, it's because of the Slayer shirt at the family gathering.
That's right. Well, I feel like in some ways you've answered this next question. It's about what have you said no to that has made a significant impact in your life?
I first was going to answer this with meat. And then I realized that I should just lump that into the fitness thing as far as, a change in habit. So I would say the one thing that I've said no to that made a significant impact is religion. It took a long time. I think I was near like 28 29. I don't remember exactly what age, but to like be okay with coming out, I guess, saying that I was an atheist. I had felt that way my entire life. As a young child, I was so anti-church, anti-religion, anti-everything that I just hated everything about it. I would go and stay with my cousins at my grandmother's house. And if I happened to stay there on a Saturday night, I knew that we were going to have to deal with some church stuff the next day. And it was awful. It's like suddenly we all have to dress a certain way and go to this place, and they put the kids in the basement, and we have to hear these people tell us these fucking stories. And I never believed any of it. It was just awful. I hated all of it.
Yeah.
And we would go, my mom's side of the family is Catholic. And I'm pretty sure that if you grow up Catholic these days, you become an atheist pretty quickly. It's just how it goes. I mean, it's hard to live your whole life in guilt. But that's what they're all
repercussion.
About. Yeah. It just never made sense to me that we would go to church on holidays and they would make you feel bad about the fact that you weren't going there on the other day. I was like, dude, I don't even want to be here now. You're going to shame me into coming more? Are you kidding? So getting to the point where I was even okay with saying that, again, being afraid of this backlash. And whenever your whole family is religious, even the people that, if you would stop and think of their general behaviors, and if you would look at just that stuff written down in a list of these people do these things, do you think they're religious or not? I don't even know what that means at this point. But back then, I probably would have thought no to most of those. And yet those were the same people in my family that were the churchgoers. It just never made sense. So, yeah, now being okay with it. And my mom, I remember one point she came to visit us in Florida and saying that we're going to have to talk about this atheist stuff. And I was like, well, there's nothing to talk about. Like, it just is. And they finally left me alone about it. And they know where I stand with religion. And I think deep down, if they really were honest with themselves, they might have a different opinion than they think that they do, because they've always just done it. And it's that idea of, well, this is the way that's always been, like those most dangerous words in business and pretty much everything. And I'm a huge proponent of questioning why things are, and not just letting stuff go on and being the way that it is because it's the way that it's always been. If it makes sense and you question it and it proves it out, move along. It's fine. But I think a lot of times you'll find that that's not the case. And with religion, for me, that was not the case. None of this stuff makes sense to me. And there's a lot of folks will think that you can't have a moral compass or what is morality to you if you don't have some doctrine to go by. And I personally don't believe that you need anything to be a moral person. I know morals really make sense in general, like because they're subjective, then what's the point? But just trying to be a decent person and realizing that you have a finite amount of time here, and just the concept of doing things in this life that you actually know that is happening, but the prospect of something happening somewhere else, and if you don't, that you get eternally punished for it. If you frame it in that context and you don't tell a young child that doesn't have the ability to fucking think about this stuff critically whenever you're brainwashing them with it, no one in their right mind would believe any of it. And that's my problem with it. It survives only because we inflict it on children at such a young age, to the point that they believe everything you say. Mm-hmm. It's like the sky is blue and you're going to burn in hell if you don't do the things that I tell you that you need to do or that are written here. And that's fucking scary to me.
Yeah. But it sounds like for you, this was all introduced to you as a youth, right? Now you perhaps started thinking critically and intentionally for yourself much earlier than many do. But you made that intentional decision to pivot away from organized religion in this case.
Yeah, I think they made it pretty easy. Again, if you grow up around Catholics, it's not hard because they just literally make you feel bad about everything that you're doing. And no one looks happy when you go there. No one is happy about any of it. Like it's all just going through the motions. And I hate that. And I'm talking about being intentional. If you're going through the motions in anything, you're doing it wrong. Big time.
Yeah.
But if you don't stop and think about why you're doing something, or do you really believe it, or is it just what you've always done?
That's just it, isn't it? If you don't stop and think about it.
Yeah.
So what's going to trigger anybody to stop and think about it?
Hey, it's really taking that step back, and maybe there's always something that there's a stressor for you that happens around some event. A lot of times it's family gatherings at the holidays, or I know that somebody's going to bring up this subject and I just don't like when they do it, but maybe they don't ever actually talk about it. Or yeah, I would say that everybody should just take current stock of what it is that they do that doesn't feel like they're getting enjoyment or benefit out of it, and sort it out. See if it's worth your time. Again, it's a very small amount of time relative to how long everything has been here on the planet. Why waste time?
Right. So maybe just like 30 minutes is all you need.
Sure. And the problem with a lot of those bigger things is they're paradigm shifts for you. They're things that have been ingrained in you for your entire existence. And to think that you're challenging that or going to be ostracized from some group that, maybe you live in close proximity to all of them, and now suddenly you don't have friends or you're worried that you're not going to have friends because
right. It's the fear even, right?
Yeah. And I would say that anybody that would choose to not be your friend because of a differing belief probably wasn't a decent friend to begin with. And there's a whole lot of stuff that goes with it. And fear of being ostracized is huge in any of those. Like, hey, I'm going to go and do this.
Right.
Put you well out of your comfort zone.
Just the fear that it might happen, right? That you're going to be removed from whatever group that you're currently associated with. Right.
But hopefully there's at least one person that you can open up to and talk with about that kind of stuff, that you don't fear anything negative is going to come of it. Even if they're not a close person, maybe it's because they're not close with you that you're able to say this stuff. And then just the act of saying it builds confidence. And then it starts to form a new side of your identity. And then now you have that to fall back on whenever someone questions your new direction. It's like, well, no, this is where I want to go, and this is how I feel, same way that you do. And understanding that can exist in someone else in a different form, but just as passionately or intensely, is hard for a lot of people. There's this whole political divide now that unfortunately it's mostly driven by a very small set of opinions that we then define an entire person or group of people by. And most people think a lot of ways about a lot of stuff. You probably think the same way about a lot of things. We're all the same kind of thing. We're all humans.
Right. But when it comes to filling out a bubble, one of two bubbles on the sheet,
right,
you got to put yourself somewhere, right?
Yeah. And unfortunately those come with a lot of baggage. So yeah, it's tough. But again, if you take the time to ask those hard questions of yourself, come up with what you think you actually feel. You've probably been feeling it for a long time and just were afraid to say it. But again, maybe finding that person that you can bring it up to and have that conversation, and that first time will feel really good, and just makes it easier to form that new identity. And this could be about anything, like I don't like dance class, Mom. I don't want to do dance anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It could be anything.
Yeah, you're right. It doesn't have to be this deep, heartfelt, heavy topic.
Mm-hmm. I don't want to have my birthday party at the indoor pool anymore. The chlorine burns my eyes.
Right.
I thought you loved the pool. Nope.
No. No, I know that you love the pool, right? Or whatever it is. Very well stated. I mean, finding that person too, it might be tricky, right? Again, we talk about the fear of the backlash, the potential backlash. How do you suss out who might be safe, so to speak?
Right.
Because at some point you feel like it's worth the risk to speak up, to have a conversation with someone that maybe is not in alignment with how things have been all along. That paradigm shift you referenced.
Yeah. Just don't take to social media with it. To do it in person with someone.
I mean, if you want more, fuel for you to continue feeling, that same way, then it's available for you, right?
Right.
Yeah. I'm having many questions now about this. How do you find that if you don't have that person in your inner circle or that's available to you seemingly, how do you find that? How do you take that next step then?
I mean, heck, there's like counselors and that kind of thing that's their job. And a lot of people would think, oh, well, geez, if I go and see somebody and talk about this stuff, what does that say about me? It's like, well, it says you need somebody to talk to, and that's it. It's that simple. And if you don't have a friend that you can confide in, or if maybe that's the person that you're afraid of telling or what the backlash is going to be, go talk to somebody else. You'll eventually figure out the way to broach the subject. You have to be willing to do it. But if it's bothering you that much, I mean, you owe it to yourself, I think, to find the help or find someone to tell you what the next steps are.
If they want to make that change.
Yeah.
Right.
Or just making it easier to say those words out loud. Sometimes you're only saying something in your head, but if you actually vocalize it and you say those words that get demonized, like vegetarian or atheist, or they come with a negative stigma, but why? Because they're not the norm. But that doesn't mean that they're bad, especially at the root.
Right.
Whatever the thing may be.
Right. But, in some paradigms, those are demonized. Those are bad things, right?
Sure.
In the same way that a Republican or a Democrat.
Oh, yeah.
Just the term. We don't need to necessarily go down that. We've kind of touched on it, but, they're just words. They're ways of identifying. They had a certain meaning once upon a time, and they certainly have associations now.
Yeah. The scariest thing is those words mean something totally different to different people.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
They can come with a lot of weight, a lot of negative weight, depending on who it is that's hearing them. And if that's what the fear is saying those things and getting that reaction from that person, maybe you don't have to use that term, but you can still get the point across and explaining it by defining it or telling your story about how you arrived at your decision and how long it's been and how difficult it's been for you to arrive there. And how much you didn't want to have this conversation because of the fear. And if that person on the other end, truly likes you and values you, I can't imagine anybody receiving that kind of story and not welcoming it.
Mm-hmm.
That's worthwhile.
Well, I think that qualifier is key. That's worthwhile, right? Because we may have people in our circles, we're worried that if we put them against that test, they're not going to pass it.
Sure.
And so might it not be easier to not bring it up with them at all, just to ensure that we don't lose that relationship, as shallow as it might be, or as much as you can't fully be yourself around it, is what's worth it? The potential loss of that relationship, or to be quote unquote fine.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, you're going to be just constantly thinking about it. It's going to grow, and you're probably going to not enjoy being around that person or in that circle for very long after you get to this point where you have this internal struggle. So it's already not good. So either you have this less than version of whatever you might have had that's going to continue to deteriorate as you struggle with this, or you confront it and do it as nicely and with as much, be thoughtful about it. But yeah, anyone would owe it to themselves to just be honest.
Well, I'm hearing two things that, they owe it to themselves to be able to have a conversation with somebody about it, right? About this feeling of intentionality, this feeling that, hey, I'm starting to question some things that have always been, or that have been the accepted way all along. And then I'm hearing the second piece is this potential relationship with the person that we're going to say it to or say it about. Mm-hmm. But you also reference, speaking to a counselor or someone like that, someone you don't necessarily have that concern of what that relationship is. Like it's someone you can keep safely, and you're not worried about how they're going to feel about you or anything, because at the end of the day, they're doing their job and you don't need them to love you, right? Or right. Right. You don't have this long history. You don't have their bias of what they believe is best for you. Yeah. Right. So it sounds like that could be additionally challenging if you don't have someone like that and you only have your circle, because then you have the challenge of speaking up for the first time, which is hard enough. But then you have the concern of speaking up to this person who you don't know if they're quote unquote safe or not.
Right.
So in the world of, because obviously what I do for a living, what would you say to people who maybe feel like they don't have that safe person in their inner circle, or they're not willing to address the fear, like, no, I'm worried that I just may lose them. They're my only support and I can't bring this up and be myself around them.
Having that sounding board, that safe space, and having someone that they really do want to know what you're thinking and have the tools to help you in whatever way you feel that you want to be helped. If you ask for the help, they can steer you in the right direction, but aren't going to tell you specifically what to do, I don't think. Obviously, they're not going to know more than what you tell them. And they're not going to know necessarily more than what you tell them about these other folks and what your fears are. But sometimes just saying this stuff out loud for the first time to anybody will make you feel better. And then you can start to talk about it and not think about it. But it's that feeling of relief is tremendous. And then you start to feel like it's not impossible. And you're undoubtedly going to get some suggestions that you didn't think of, yourself, and walk away just at least feeling justified. Probably that's a huge help in building that confidence in why you feel the way that you do. And you can kind of suss out what is important. Is it letting that other person know this change is here, or maybe it's something that you're worried about, that someone else's behavior and you don't know how to bring it up to them. But yeah, all of it leads to, if you don't have someone to bring this up to, absolutely reach out. And I know you and I go back so many years before you were doing this professionally, which I think is so cool that that's where you ended up, because I don't know how many times you were the one for me years and years and years ago, all these big problems. And I remember the first time and I was just dumping some huge shit on you, and you were like, I think this is well out of my ability. You got to talk to somebody professionally. And then I had an issue with that even at that point, because I didn't, then it would be the person who had gone to talk to a counselor. So what? And I did, and it helped. And I wouldn't have done it if it weren't for those conversations with you and pushing me toward it. But yeah, having that person is huge. And if you don't have that person, there's a bunch of them out there. But yeah, I mean, like I said, well before you were doing this as a profession, you were doing it and not knowing it. and it worked out really well. So
That's awesome. Well, I'm glad. And yes, I've been around your world for a while.
Yeah.
And it definitely, and I think this conversation is a key indicator of that, but it certainly seemed that way for a while, that you've come through on the other side of something. Right.
Oh yeah.
Would you say that you have something in your life that feels just about perfect?
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and I think my home life is, that it always felt like a very living arrangement up until we lived here. There was something that was, we had to make sacrifices on one aspect of something or another. We lived in our last house for like 9 years, and we made updates to it and stuff, and it was some cosmetic, some functional, some necessary things, but it seemed like every time I went to do something, there was more of a pain in the ass than it needed to be. Like we got new countertops, and I had to install new drains in the sink bowls, and because of the way pipes are routed under the sinks, it made it really difficult in both of our sinks. I was like, why? This sucks. There was other faucets that were leaking, just so many things. And it was just really frustrating. And then we come out here, and one, I love this state and this part of the country. It's amazing for what I'm into. I'm looking out my window now and seeing like 60 and 70 foot tall pine trees. And I love that, those are literally in my backyard. So, you and I talked whenever I was looking for a new house about this, what do you call it, the spreadsheet of destiny. And it was coming up with these things, being intentional about finding your new home and what things you wanted it to have and what things were absolute must-haves and why, and making sure that whenever, if a house that you saw didn't meet those criteria, then you move on. I think there's a bunch of houses. It's easy. Just keep looking. There'll be more next week. And next month, it'll be completely different. So we did that. And man, I did that for 9 months. I got really good at looking at houses virtually from across the country. But yeah, we didn't want any rear neighbors. I wanted to look out and see trees, and we have that. We wanted to live in a neighborhood, but have some bit of seclusion. And our house happens to sit behind other houses, backs up to a wetland where they can't build because it's a protected area. Our house isn't on the street, so it's really quiet back here. We have the neighborhood network for the kids to play with. They have a ton of friends. They go out. It's really safe. Proximity to work was good. Proximity to stores and that kind of thing is all that stuff. It didn't just happen. The school district is great. But that was we were so intentional about all of those things and didn't stop until we found the one that would work. And we even we put an offer in on a house in the next neighborhood over, and it didn't work out. There was a bunch of stuff that needed fixing. And when we looked at this list, it was like 60 plus pages long. Most of the stuff was stuff that we had just done on our house that we were selling to get it ready to sell. And we're like, we're not doing that again. So we didn't. And we ended up with a new place, and it was less expensive. It was more of what we wanted. So, it's what we wanted. And that was that next step. Before that, it was, how do we even narrow down? Like, we've never been to this place. How do I know what neighborhood to go by? And a friend of mine at work told me about, you can go by the schools. You got kids, they need to go to a good school.
Wow.
And I was looking at elementary schools. Tanya, my wife, told me, well, you need to make sure that they're going to end up in a good high school. That one's really important because that's what sends them off into college. And if that sucks, but the elementary school is good, that doesn't work. And my friend at work told me, find that good. I mean, high schools have the biggest radius. And there's a few middle schools that serve them, and then a bunch of elementary schools that serve those middle schools. She's like, look at the middle schools and look at the ratings on those. It's an awkward time for kids in that age group, and that's where a lot of them make or break. So if you find a good middle school that serves a good district both up and down, that's where you want to be. So that's what we started to do. That was my measuring stick. I knew the high schools that were good, but then I would filter down to the middle schools in those areas. And that's how we ended up narrowing down our search areas. And then there was all those other criteria that fed into it. But that was the biggest one. And I had to be within a certain distance of where I was going to work.
Right. Which that was already on your list as well, right?
Right. There was that triangle of cost, commute time, and schools.
That's great. And just more experience with success. And it just builds the confidence into, this is the way to do things. This is intentionally is the way to do it. It's the way forward. Yeah.
Instead of thinking that, again, that not being the victim or thinking that things have to be a certain way, or I can't have that. Like, well, you can. It might not be exactly, it might not look exactly the way that you think that it needs to or should, but you can find a version of it that will work in your current circumstances, and then figure out whatever the steps are to get to that next one. And then put all of your energy into the very next step instead of the one that's 5 steps down the line, that all of that energy is going to be wasted because you haven't put any energy into this first thing.
That's fascinating. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. I mean, if you need to get to work and you don't have a car, but you're worried about, what clothes you're going to wear whenever you get to work. Well, you need to get your ass to work first.
Right.
Reliably, get a bus pass or something, start saving up, or whatever other analogy. But it's those steps and putting the energy and effort into the right one at the right time.
That's cool. Who is someone you admire, and what do you admire about them?
So I was thinking about folks that I admire, and it was actually kind of hard. And then I thought, well, it doesn't need to be somebody that anybody knows.
And it doesn't have to be someone you admire all qualities about that person.
Right. But I came up with a good one. A friend of mine at work, his name is Chris. He's someone that I admire greatly. And he's a dad. He's got 4 kids. I think he's a year younger than me, but actually has several more years like on his work resume in the industry that we're working in, because he started a little earlier than I did. But I mean, his attitude is amazing. He's always so positive. Everyone likes being around him. He's funny. He's physically fit, athletic, active guy. I mean, but he doesn't brag about any of these things. He just is. This is what he does. And he just exudes confidence. He's a fantastic person. I mean, I love him. He's awesome. And it's because of those things. I guess looking at it, I had asked him once when we went out to lunch, and I was like, dude, how are you such a good dad? He's like, well, what makes you think that you know that I'm such a good dad? And I was like, I guess that's a good point. I don't. I just assume that you are. He's like, well, there's good days and bad days and stuff. There's hard times dealing with, and again, he's got 2 more kids than I do. But that conversation, I think, helped me realize that not everyone should use the same measuring stick for having success in your situation. In fact, I don't think anybody's measuring stick is the same as anyone else's. And if, in fact, you're using someone else's, you're probably going to be disappointed. In either way, you might think that, well, we're far exceeding what we should be because at least you have a house and a car. But, your success is only defined by you, and shouldn't let others drive what success may look like in their eyes, even from your perspective. It's good to have goals, though, and to aspire, but not solely for the fact of, oh, I think it should look like that family. But just in general, he's the whole package, I think, is just a great person, like I said. And at this point in my life, all of those things, being a good dad, being a good husband, being athletic, being healthy, being funny, being well-liked, being successful, I don't know what else there is, And he's got all that stuff. And it's not like I'm not jealous of it. And I think after talking to him about those things, and it makes you feel good. As long as you feel like you have that in your own world, then you do. And I think that helped me realize that I also have that, So, yeah, great guy.
Well, it certainly wouldn't suck to be around him, it sounds.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I remember we all went out to lunch once at this tiny Italian place. They only open for lunch in Seattle. It's called Il Corvo. And they have a line out the door. This is pre-COVID. And you would have to go really early to even only have to stand in line for like 30 minutes. And if you went at the lunch hour rush, it's 45 minutes to an hour. It's ridiculous. They're only open for that small window. They make 2 sauces and 2 pastas every day. They're always different. And they use Instagram to tell you, here's what we have today. So I've only gone once, and just a group of 8 of us or something. This place seats maybe 20 people, and they get hundreds every day, or did. We're all sitting, and we finally made it through the line, got our food, and we're sitting down and talking. And one of the other people mentioned to Chris, he's, like an project executive level guy. They're like, but you don't seem like that, and you're easy to talk to and nice and stuff. And he's like, I know, I'm doing this position a terrible injustice, or something like that. It was just cool to hear him acknowledge the fact that he's doesn't ever want to be looked at like that in his position. And you don't have to be. And I like that too, about folks in general, that can just be themselves and not have to live up to some standard that comes with a certain level of success or whatever.
Well, clearly, you admire this thing, all these aspects about this guy, Chris. And part of it is that he's not buying into the paradigm, right? If he has to be a certain way to be an exec or whatever level. So, yeah. What do you imagine some people admire about you?
So one thing I've heard and that I didn't realize was that there's a couple things. I tend to be really laid back. I don't get overly worked up about stuff, or try to not overreact about things. And another is the levity that I bring to situations. I always try to lighten the mood or crack jokes, and because it doesn't need to be stuffy in business all the time. And most people, I find, that really appreciate that about me, and that anybody that does that in general. But yeah, I make it a point to try to lighten the mood and have fun in everything that I have to do that isn't inherently fun already.
Well, these are some very serious times that we can find ourselves in, and I think it would be all the more appreciated. At least I hope so. I can certainly attest to the levity and the calm that you can bring to situations.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, like I said, I really appreciate all the time and the connection here.
Absolutely.
Just the insightful responses and thought you've given to these questions. So I really appreciate it. Is there anything that, if you want to use this as your platform for whale rights or anything in particular, is there something you'd like to share that folks will be able to listen to? Do you want folks to be able to connect with you for any reason? Use the next couple of minutes here to share whatever you'd like.
So the one thing I was thinking of here was strongly against social media and in general. It started using it a long time ago, and I think the final nail in the coffin for me to stop using it was in 2016, and see no reason to ever go back. And that was the presidential race at that time, and just turned all those platforms into just a lot of negativity, and I didn't need that. And it was kind of a time thief in general, this mindless scrolling. And recently watched the documentary. It was called The Social Dilemma, and they much more eloquently put into words what is wrong with it. And these executives and people who help produce these platforms now speaking out against them because they've gotten so big and so powerful, and how dangerous they are for those of us with children and setting them up into this world that's a norm, it's pretty scary. So I try to be as open about why I feel the way that I do about these things with my kids, just so they have an understanding. And I think they are getting it in at least the way that children do. I'm not telling them to do something or to think a certain way. But then also the thing that it breeds is this social divide. In it, we touched on it earlier a little bit about letting a single opinion of someone define that person. And it isn't right. We're all humans. We all have many, many faces and facets about us that make us who we are. And I think at the core, if you're talking to someone that's the same being as you, I'm pretty sure you have more in common with them than differences. And a differing opinion on certain things shouldn't be a reason to hate that person or that group of people. And I don't know what the end outcome is going to be. It's kind of scary because at the trajectory that we're going, I don't see it ever getting the divide ever coming closer together. I think it's only going to be driven farther apart. But I guess I would just say to remember that there are things that we all have in common, and to look to those things instead of the differences. And you'll find that it softens the blow for any of these other things that you may not see eye to eye on. And you'll realize that it's okay to not see eye to eye on those things. And you can still enjoy someone's company because of all these other facets.
Very nicely stated.
Thank you.
Perhaps we can end on that. I really appreciate your time. It's always fun to talk to you.
Absolutely, man.
But I appreciate the additional time and energy to meet today. So until we chat again very soon, I think.
Thanks. Take care.
Wonderful. All right, Shawn. Be good. Take care. Thanks.
This has been Intentionally Ever After, hosted by intentional lifestyle coach Joe Bukartek. If you would like to have your own intentional conversation with Joe on or off the air, visit intentionallyeverafter.com. Thanks for listening.